In January of 1969, a production crew led by director Michael Lindsay Hogg set out to film the Beatles writing and recording their next album. The plan was to present it as a television series, which was to be concluded with footage of a large-scale concert. For various reasons, a lot of those plans pretty much fell apart, and in 1970, instead of a show, a film was released using footage taken over the course of the 3 weeks the production crew spent with the band. The documentary was called Let It Be after the Beatles' final album release. This film made two major contributions to Beatles lore. The most well-known is that it concludes with the iconic Rooftop concert in central London, the final public performance of the band as a whole. The other thing is that it sort of pushes the idea that it was this stressful, unhappy time for the band overall. On top of the film's editing feeling a bit all over the place and lacking in any sort of tone, it shows two heated disagreements, both involving Paul McCartney, with little to no context or resolution. It left Beatles fans feeling pretty weird, especially since the film was released a month after the band officially announced their breakup. Let It Be's lack of context for a lot of its footage kind of allowed people to project their own narrative onto what was going on between band members at that time. And for the more toxic fans, it seemed to support their theory that Yoko Ono single-handedly broke up the Beatles. 60 hours of footage and 150 hours of audio were condensed into an hour and 20 minutes that reads like some bizarre ransom note set out to let everyone know that the Beatles got annoyed and played for a bit. But thank God, a good boy appeared, and he fixed it. Peter Jackson's 2021 documentary series, The Beatles Get Back, might be one of the greatest do-overs of all time. To the point where it's not so much of a do-over as much as it's, oh, somebody finally made this thing. The series is divided into 3 episodes and clocks in at 7 hours and 48 minutes total. While Let It Be jumps around into the middle of random recording sessions and conversations with no rhyme or reason, Get Back dedicates itself to creating a very precise timeline of events from beginning to end. And to make sure nobody is having trouble visualizing this, each day is punctuated by cutting to a January 1969 calendar so we can be reminded exactly where we're at. We have a distinct sense of how everyone was feeling each day, how much progress was being made on each song, and a tremendous amount of context as to why certain conflicts would arise between band members. If you've seen the old documentary, you're probably well aware of the infamous "I'll play whatever you want me to play" argument between George and Paul. Although that moment isn't any less uncomfortable to watch in Get Back, we finally get to see it play out in its entirety. We finally get the opportunity to see both sides more clearly, and since the documentary is so thorough, we get to see how that conflict was ultimately resolved. I don't want to spoil anything for people that haven't seen it yet, but there is a very crucial piece of audio in part 2 of a conversation between Paul and John. They did not know that they were being recorded, and it's highly emotional. Like, I had to pause it and recover for a few minutes afterwards. It was a lot. And that's really one of the major takeaways from this series, is that these men really loved one another, and you can see that so much more clearly here. The Let It Be feature was so toneless that you didn't really know what to make of it, especially since the Beatles had already broken up when it was released. So many people just thought that they couldn't stand each other anymore and that's why they broke up, but it's not nearly that simple. They were as close as family, so tension, anger, joy, and forgiveness could all happen within the same day.
Did you give him any, did you remember?
No, I had a lot of talks with Peter Jackson because I didn't actually like the original one because it was very dark. Not even dark, it was dull.
Oh.
And it was all about this argument that John and Paul had. And there was lots of fun, there was lots of joy. You know, there wasn't only that. There was a lot of good music, of course, but also, you know, we had to laugh. 4 guys in the room. It's either, you know, it's up or it's down or it's laughter or, you know, we're acting out, whatever.
And I'd like to take this opportunity, by the way, to personally give Ringo Starr the Best Behaved Boy Award. Like, he is so chill and has such a good attitude throughout this whole thing and just goes with the flow no matter what's going on. My guy held it together for 3 straight weeks and didn't complain once.
Some sort, either a surprise audience like we might get tomorrow, or
I'll just thought I'd let you know.
Oh, and speaking of good vibes, the legend, Billy Preston, finally gets the screen time he deserves. Getting to watch Paul McCartney write Get Back in, like, real time is so nuts. Like, to get to see his process is wild. To get to see all of their processes and how that chemistry amongst these four men that had been cultivated over the course of a decade really worked. Peter Jackson did such an outstanding job with this. The way that he made sure to highlight what needed to be highlighted for the sake of making everything flow properly and feel cohesive was just great. The building of tension during the Rooftop concert in regards to the cops showing up was just perfect. He just did such a great job of presenting this whole story while making sure to include footage of the original director complaining about how there was no story. It was so petty, and I love him for that. I especially love the inclusion of the Beatles continuously reading articles about themselves that aren't true and laughing at them. It's so funny, and it's fascinating that this footage was originally cut down into something that almost reads like one of those tabloid articles. But now we have this beautiful, sprawling documentary that reveals so much about what really went on during this production. This was such a gift for Beatles fans, and really anyone who's interested in the creative process. I've been a huge Beatles fan my entire life, and I cannot tell you how much this meant to me. And I can't even begin to fathom how much this must have meant to the people involved, to the families of the people involved. For Giles Martin, son of Beatles producer George Martin, to be the music supervisor on this is very special. For Sean Lennon to get to see these candid moments of his parents together, for Heather McCartney to see herself running around the studio as a little girl, there's just so much more joy that just wasn't presented in the final product all those years ago. The fact that this footage just sat in a vault for 50 years is such a crime. I just want to give Peter Jackson a hug. And maybe I'm just a weirdo, but I don't think that I'm alone in the fact that I would gladly watch the 50-hour cut. I laughed, I cried, and I was just straight up overwhelmed by how beautiful this thing was. Lord of the Rings: Return of the Kings is my favorite movie of the year, period. 10 out of 10. And you might say, oh, but you can't have that be your number one because it's technically a series. And to that I say, be quiet.